Good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Sustaining the Humanities through the American Rescue Plan, or SHARP grant, Frequently Asked Questions webinar. We're going to get started, and I'm going to go over the agenda very briefly. My name is also Anaia Peddie. So today I'll give a brief introduction. I'll go over the National Endowment for the Humanities, Humanities DC, who I am. Then we'll go over what the humanities are. We'll talk about the specifics of the SHARP grant, expenses, and then we'll have time for questions. Oh, one thing that I want to mention is that we will be taking questions through the Q&A box, so please put your questions there. The chat box will just be reserved for regular comments. Thank you. So first I want to acknowledge that this award is granted with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And so we want to thank the NEH for allowing us to be able to establish this grant program. Excuse me. So a little bit about the American Rescue Plan Act of 2020. This is supplemental funding designed to assist humanities organizations and other institutions affected by the coronavirus. And it's a part of a larger funding initiative, which is the American Rescue Plan. Yeah, part of the American Rescue Plan. And the purpose of the ARP funding is to prevent, prepare for, respond to, and recover from the coronavirus. And I want to share a little bit about Humanities DC. Actually, I'm going to pause just very briefly so I can plug in my computer. Excuse me, just one moment. Thank you for your patience. So Humanities DC was founded in 1980, and it is an affiliate of the National Endowment for the Arts. Its mission is to enrich the quality of life, excuse me, foster intellectual stimulation, and promote cross-cultural understanding and appreciation of local history. And I am the SHARP grants consultant. My name is Anaia Peddie. I will be managing the grant application process. I have put together this webinar for you today. I am also the point of contact if you should have any questions about the RFP, the application process, or just in general what the SHARP grants are offering this year. And this is my email address. It'll also appear later on in the presentation. So we want to go over what the humanities are, because humanities is a term that encompasses many disciplines. And so from the National Foundation on the Arts and Humanities Act, which led to the founding of the National Endowment for the Humanities, humanities are language, linguistics, literature, history, philosophy, archaeology, ethics and religion, and criticism and theory of arts. And these have a humanistic content and imply humanistic methods, excuse me. And this is how the humanities is defined through federal funding. Now, what are humanities organizations? So we consider humanities organizations, they have an explicit connection to the humanities along with a track record, excuse me, of specifically working in the humanities. So this would be what would be considered like really the meat and potatoes of what it is that you do would be centered around humanities and humanities activities. And these are some examples of what we would consider humanities organizations. And these are categories. This is not meant to be exhaustive, but these are some examples of humanities organizations. So they can be cultural and ethnic organizations, history organizations, humanities museums, literature organizations, humanities education, media, journalism, and documentary organizations, libraries and archives, consortiums, alliances, and collections of the above named groups. So it's pretty expansive in terms of how humanities organizations may be configured and what their focus may be. And now we'll go over the information relevant to the SHARP grant. So the purpose of this grant is to help organizations continue their existing or planned public humanities programming by retaining staff and maintaining their financial obligations. This is what we would consider general operating support. And the grant period for the SHARP grant will be November 16th, 2021 to November 16th, 2022, so a year. Also, I would like to note that within this year, there will be at least one programmatic report required of grantees, and there will be a final report that will be due 30 days after the close of the grant period. And so now I'm going to go over the application period. So the application opens up on this Friday, September 3rd, 2021. And to apply, you need to have an account on the Humanities DC Grants portal. We will provide a link to that portal in the chat. And the application closes at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on October 11th, 2021. Now, oopsies, excuse me. I want to go over some of the things that we're looking for in your application. So we want to have a description of your organization's central activities. So like I said, the things that make up your services and your programs, we would like to know what those are. And we want to have a good understanding of how the coronavirus has impacted your organization, specifically your income, so whatever revenue you've been able to generate, your public humanities programming or projects. And also, we're very, very interested in, and especially NEH wants information about how this has affected your job. So how many people may have been able to retain their jobs, or if you're looking, retain their jobs or lost jobs, we would like that information in the application. And we want to understand how you have pivoted during this time so that you can, have alternative programming models or what you are considering to do given where we are at this time in terms of the coronavirus affecting how we interact with the public. And last, we would like a description of how these funds would be used. And so I want to go over what this funding is again. And so this funding is general operating support. And so that means that this funding is unrestricted. It can be used as you all see fit for things like rent, administration, personnel, operating expenses, et cetera. And one thing that I want to kind of clarify within this is that we also talk about personnel or hiring on people. That can include a consultant or even a full-time staff person. Maybe you wanted to hire a development assistant or a development manager. You could use some of these funds to do something like that. Now, there are restrictions on how the organizations can use general operating funds. We'll go over that in a section about expenses. A lot of that is coming down from federal guidelines around what are considered allowable and unallowable expenses. And I want to go over the award amount. So we have in this table, what you can see is that award amounts are going to be based on your budget, the average of your budget over the last 3 years. And so in the column on the left, we have organizations' budget. So for organizations with budgets at $300,000 or below, you're eligible, or you could receive up to a maximum award of $20,000. For organizations with budgets between $300,000 and $1 million, the maximum available award is up to $30,000. For organizations with budgets over $1 million, the maximum available award amount would be up to $40,000. And I just want to emphasize that this is the average of your budget over the last 3 years. Now I want to go over the eligibility requirements. So we're going to ask that you be a federally incorporated 501c3 nonprofit organization. that you are registered in the district with DCRA as a domestic entity or a foreign entity. And we want to make sure that you are in good standing with the Department of Consumer Regulatory Affairs, DCRA, specifically that you have an active business license at the time of application. We want to make sure that you are also compliant with the Office of Tax and Revenue and also with DOES and then in the IRS. We also would ask that you have a valid DUNS number. We understand that some people may have applied for a DUNS number and be in the process of receiving that information. So if you do not have your DUNS number at this time, we would ask that you provide information about when you expect to receive that. Additional requirements would be also the citywide Clean Hands certificate, and that would come from the Office of Tax and Revenue. And that would kind of certify that you don't have any outstanding tax liabilities or things that you owe to the district. We also, it's really important, or something that we require, is that your organization the majority of the people served by your organization must come from the district. And we want you to have a principal business office address that is located in the district also. You have to be in good standing with Humanities DC, meaning that you are not under any sort of compliance measures, or you've completed your final reports that allows you to apply for this grant. There are some prohibited, applicants. And so if you are a private club, organizations that, discriminate on the basis of race, gender, or any of the protected classes based in the DC's Human Rights Act, for-profit commercial entities, political organizations whose primary focus is in the performing arts. If that is you, you can also check for funding opportunities with the DC Commission on the Arts and Humanities. Organizations without paid staff, universities, foreign governments, federal entities, organizations that may be receiving significant federal funding, and District of Columbia government agencies. So these are also some proposal elements, things that, these are proposal elements that I went over again in what we're looking for in the application section. So again, we want to really kind of focus on having an understanding of what your programmatic focus may be, the impact that COVID has had on your business and your humanities programming. Now we're going to go over the expenses portion. So for this grant particular, fiscal sponsorships are prohibited. And this is the portion where we'll go over allowable expenses. So from the ARP funding, the ARP Act of 2021, these activities have to align with the appropriation. So this is again about preventing and preparing for and responding to the coronavirus. And again, the general operating expenses may include things like salary, consulting fees, rent, utilities, information technology, or administrative fees. Now, in particular with certain information technologies, if that is going to be a significant portion of your budget, then that is something we would discuss during your allocation around how much of your award can be used for technology. So some prohibited expenses include food and beverages, tuition and scholarship, debt reduction, regranting, and funding to foreign or domestic government agencies. Now, these are unallowable expenses. So these unallowable expenses are coming down from, federal guidelines where this funding in particular cannot be used for the following purposes. And a lot of this is defined in the subpart E cost principles. I can provide the link to this. It's a larger document that has sections where it'll go over more explicit details or explicit examples of what is defined as unallowable expenses. So on this grant, you also cannot charge indirect costs. Expenses cannot overlap project costs with any other federal funding or approved federal awards that you may have. And these funds for these activities you wouldn't be approved if they were being supported with other NEH grants in particular. Again, you cannot re-grant this money. Um, Also, during the actual award period, you won't be allowed to expense any costs prior to March 15th, 2021. And this next bullet point really pertains to some of the equipment that I mentioned. So equipment costs cannot be in excess of 20% of the total project cost. So that's something to keep in mind when I mentioned that you could use this funding for information technology. Again, it couldn't be more like than 20% of the total your total grant award. Travel, that includes both foreign and domestic, construction, purchasing of property, renovation, environmental sustainability. Those are also unallowable expenses. You, this is more of them. So you also, unallowable expenses also include collections, acquisitions, um, the preservation, organization, or description of materials related to research, not regularly accessible for research. I want to clarify that. You cannot use this to promote any sort of political, religious, or ideological point of view. No, in advocacy, lobbying, and any projects that would fall outside of the humanities and humanistic social sciences. And this is also important to note. That would be the creation or performance of art, creative writing, autobiographies, memoirs, and creative nonfiction, and quantitative social science research or policy studies. Excuse me. Excuse me. And I wanted to go over a little bit of the reporting. So I mentioned this earlier, but during a part of the awards process, if you are selected to receive a grant, you will be required to complete at least one programmatic report and a final report. And final reports will be due 30 days after the close of the grant period. So here's my contact information. I will also put this in the chat, but I wanted to now, and I can see that there are coming up. One thing that I also wanted to mention is that there is no cash match for this grant either. So you won't be required to have matching funds to apply. But now I want to move into, I can see that there are some questions, and I'm going to look there to answer them. Now, I also do want to say that we'll be looking in the Q&A box first for questions as a way to prioritize them. So if you do have questions, you feel free to type them there, and then we'll look there. If there are questions in the chat, we'll also look there too. But I see that there's two questions in the Q&A chat box. Okay, so thank you, Mr. Silver. It says, can you please define significant federal funding and DC government funding? Thank you. So we would consider significant federal funding is that if you're receiving an award that I would say, and I'll go back and clarify this with NEH, but I believe it's an award of at least $10,000. For the district government, I will go back and verify that information. But what we're really trying to avoid is sometimes a little bit of double dipping, because Humanities DC does receive federal funds, and we also do receive local district government funds too. Let's see. When is the application due? So the application is due October 11th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. And the application goes live this Friday. And so the next question is, excuse me, if we apply for art funding from the National Endowment for the Arts, can we still apply for this? So I have a follow-up question. Have you received the funding? And this is related to Ms. Sadler. And the reason why I'm asking that is that if you have received the funding, I would want to know what it is. Oh, not yet. Okay. No, then you're free to, you can apply. You can still apply for this. Yes. Thank you for answering that. Can I go back to the slide about unallowable expenses? Yes. Just give me one moment, Miss Archibald. Oopsies. Now I know there are 2 slides, and also I want you to know that this will be recorded, so you can review this, and also the RFP is available online too, and the unallowable expenses information is there too. But I'll leave this up right now. Will organizations who have lost staff get preference for funding? A question of this is a good question. So in the application, there is an explicit question where they will ask you about the impact on staff, and it is I would not say that it's a preference so much that it is like, it'll be a part of the scoring rubric. Now I see there's several questions. It looks like there might be a lot. Oh, thank you. And so there's one more question in the Q&A chat, and it's, if you serve both arts and humanities, we are in DC Arts and Humanities Education Collaborative, and we are applying for both NEA, ARP, and DC SHARP funding. Can we still apply for both expenses? Because can you apply for both? The expenses are separate. Yes, because so something else that I do know about NEA. Yes, so the National Endowment for the Arts, yes, you can do that, because something, so this humanities focused grant does not allow for you to create any visual arts or performance arts. And I know that the National Endowment for the Arts does have a little more flexibility. And something that I am aware of is that, and this is true for NEH, is that there's kind of, they also release, or they provide granting for specific projects. So maybe there is a specific project that, is not applicable to the SHARP funding, you can. And as a follow-up for my question about the DC federal government funding, what is the date range it covers? Okay, so when you say the date range it covers, do you mean, and this is for Mr. Silbert, do you mean when is the date that you could claim expenses, or the grant period? Oh, great, yes. Sorry, I was nodding to Ms. Rosenthal. Y'all? Yes, you can, I think you can do both for general operating, the grant period. So the grant period for SHARP for the SHARP grant is 1 year. And yeah, so our grant period, the SHARP grant period is 1 year. It's November 16th, 2021 to November 16th, 2022. What I will say is that for NEH, our grant period is actually a little longer. It's like almost 22 months, but that's because the funding was released in June of this year. So that's why there's that information about you can expense certain dates past or before March. And okay, oops, move really quickly. Oh, yes, Mr. McGlowan, I said expenses before March 15, 2021 would not be allowed. Thank you for asking that question to clarify. And okay, and so Ms. Bush asked, does visual arts include film? So this is, if you are an organization, or for this instance, if you're an organization and maybe you produce documentary films, or things like that, or media related films like journalism. I know you have tapes. This funny, you could apply. And the reason why I'm saying you could apply is because this money is intended to, the general operating support portion of it is so that you can sustain your business. Maybe there are, unfortunately, there are some organizations that may be in arrears in terms of rent, or maybe there are some financial obligations, maybe you haven't been able to get an audit, or some other kind of operational things. That money could be used for that. How many grants are we expecting to award? My estimate based on last year, let me double check this number. I feel like I think 60. I am gonna double check because I I don't want to pull down the presentation right now. Then we have a question. Are grant awards, are grant awards made on a rolling basis? For example, if we apply before October 11th, will we know sooner than we have been applied? And then will we know sooner that we have been accepted or denied? No, so we're gonna review, all applications will be reviewed after October 11th. We will, you will know awards will be made or announced November 11th, 2021. So in about a month afterwards, you should know when whether or not you've been awarded. But what I can say is that if I will go back and in this process, I will be looking at submissions. And so if you have not completed a portion of the application, maybe something is not completely filled out, you will get reminder messages. You may even hear from me encouraging you to complete something or to look over something that you may be submitting. So that is something that I will provide. Okay, great. And Ms. Bush clarified. Yes, so this money, for example, Ms. Bush was saying that one of her programs, they have a film festival and they have a monthly film series. So maybe there has been, to go back to the equipment, maybe to operate your film festival or to produce this, you need more telecommunication support. Maybe it is Zoom, maybe it's another platform. Maybe it really is even projectors or speakers or things like that. And even somebody to operate that. Maybe there's a part-time person you want to hire for this project. This money could be used for those things. Does that mean that we could recapture costs for an April 2021 virtual citywide public speaking competition? And this is from Mr. McClone. Yes. So to go back to the cost that you could recapture for that, those costs again would be operating funds. So anything related to, maybe you had to purchase additional supplies or rent materials or even any sort of manpower needed for that. Yes. Can we apply if we've already received other grants from the AECC this year? Yes. Yes, you can. And Ms. Hipkins, can you have a communication specialist paid half-time by an NEH CARES grant and half by the SHRIPE grant? Is this considered an overlapping cost? No, I'm gonna say no, this is an overlapping cost because this is NEA funding and not NEH funding. I know that, at least for me, sometimes I've confused them because the letters, just one letter off, but no, that wouldn't be considered an overlapping cost. Now, I am going to look in the chat. Or are there any more questions that people have they want to put in the Q&A box? I'm going to encourage everyone, if you put anything into the chat, to put it in the Q&A section before we go to look at the chat, just to see if there are any other questions. Yes, so Ms. Knox is asking, so you're saying you can apply for funds already spent? if for, say, technology. Yes, so there is a part, you can expense things retroactively. So once you have been notified that you have received an award, you could expense things from, I want to make sure I'm saying the right date. I wrote it down. You can expense things after March 15th, 2021. So yes, and it can be technology related. So Ms. Chapman asks, are there any priorities or preferences you are looking for in applications to serve as Sydney of the Award? So we do, there are some required information or things that we're looking for in particular. And so we do want to know the amount of residents that you do serve by ward. We'll want to also know a little more information about the types of programs that you do support. And so these things will also be given scores too. And I'm not gonna say the range is like 0 to 3, but in the application, certain things do receive, receive more, or you can be scored higher for providing more information and more detailed information about what you're saying. No, the rubric is not available in the app. What is available is the RFP. The rubric that we use to score the applications are for our grant reviewers. Okay, so if there are any more, last call for the questions in the Q&A box before we look into the child. Thank you, Ms. Withers. So Ms. Withers says, our organization has been invited to present an 8-week exhibition, installation, and history about a dance company that's been in existence for 50 years. Could this be eligible? So these funds cannot be used directly for programming. General operating support is administrative things, right? Kind of the nuts and bolts things that would allow you to put up that installation. So if that means that you needed to purchase materials, supplies, again, forms of technology, maybe you needed to hire a curator, or you wanted to give more hours to a curator that you have, you could use it for those things. And then the next question is, so will we be able to see what is weighted higher? No, you won't be able to see in the application what is weighted higher, or which questions receive more information. I mean, not more information, a higher score. You're welcome. Okay. Yeah, we will look into the chat. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box, but we'll look in the chat just very quickly to see if there are any other questions. And also for those of you who are wondering, the Q&A question, or the Q&A section, is to the right of the chat box. And it will say Q&A, it'll have like 2 little overlapping bubbles. Let me see. Are there any other questions? I know I put in the chat, there is my email address, but I wanted to put that up one more time. Are there any other questions? And I also wanted to let you know that if another question pops into your mind after this conversation, feel free to email me. My email address is listed on this page, and we can set up a time to talk where I can answer your question via email. You're very welcome. And like I said in the presentation, the application will go live this Friday, September 3rd, and it will close October 11th, 2021 at 11:59 p.m. And just another friendly reminder, the RFP is available today on Humanities DC website under the SHARP grant landing page. Okay, I don't see any more questions. Oh, one more question. Oh, you're very welcome. And I want to thank everyone for their time and participating. These are really, really great questions. If anything else comes up, between now and actually the close of the grant, feel free to send me any questions that you have. We can get on a call and kind of talk through some of these things, just to make sure that we're all aligned in terms of expectations. Let me just check one more thing in the chat. All right, we're going to end our presentation here. Again, I want to thank you for your time and participating in the SHARP grants. In the SHARP Grants Frequently Asked Questions webinar. My name is Anaia Peddie. I am the SHARP Grants Consultant, and I look forward to having you all apply. And like I said, feel free to contact me with questions or concerns. Thank you so much.